So, Mr. Chair, it is 9:30. The live stream has started, and I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. A call to order. Good morning and welcome to our virtual meeting of Brampton's Committee of Council. We will begin the meeting with the City Clerk making the roll call. Mr. Clerk.
Members of committee, I will be calling your name. Councillor Dillon will be arriving late. Councillor Singh?
Here.
Councillor Fortini? Councillor Fortini?
I'm here, Pierre.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
I'm here.
Councillor Medeiros?
Here.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman?
Present.
Councillor Paleshi?
Present.
Councillor Willens?
Here.
Councillor Santos?
Here.
And Chair Vicente is present, and also present in the meeting is Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next, approval of the agenda. Does any member wish to add a business item to today's meeting? If so, please use the chat function to add your name to the speakers list. I see Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to add an item under corporate services. It would be a discussion 9.3.1, amendments to the Ontario Building Code, the building inspector entry provision.
Thank you. The clerk will so note. I see no other speakers on my list. Councillor Bowman is moving the approval of the agenda.
Mr.
If
Chair,
there are,
Councillor Medeiros?
go ahead. Councillor Medeiros.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Vicente. I'd like to add two agenda items. One is regarding the support letter of credit for Peel Islamic Center. I've been in contact with our Commissioner of Corporate Services and our legal. It's just to give them official direction regarding a report back.
Thank you. And your second?
Oh, the second item I'd like to it's a brief discussion regarding IT security.
So through you, Mr. Chair, these would be proposed items. The first one from Councillor Medeiros would be 9.3.2 under corporate services section, and the following one on IT security would be 9.3.3.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. I see no other speakers on my board, so we have a motion moved by Councillor Bowman to approve the agenda. Since we are online, I will ask if there is anyone opposed to this motion. Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Seeing none, that carries. Meetings of Municipal Council are open to the public for transparency and accountability, and our meeting will continue to be as well with a few precautions and limitations. In-person attendance is limited. Members and most staff are participating electronically at this meeting, but the public can still participate in a number of ways, including by watching this live stream, or if they have questions about any item on the agenda today, they can email City Clerk's office at brampton.ca. Next, we move on to declarations of conflict of interest under the Municipal Act. Does any member have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act?
Hello? Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Mayor Brown, can you just mute your microphone? I see none, Mr. Clerk. If you could please note for the minutes. Next, we're moving on to item 4, the consent motion. Items listed with a caret on the agenda are considered to be routine and non-controversial. The consent motion is to adopt these matters on today's agenda without the need for a separate discussion on the items unless a member requests a separate discussion. Does any member wish to add or remove an item from the consent motion today? Seeing none, I have a motion from Councillor Santos to approve the consent motion. Any opposed? That carries. Next, we move on to announcements. Our next item is item 5.1, an announcement regarding International Day of the Girl 2020. Kenya Sarkar, the founder and lead up Girl Up Brampton, will be making this announcement, and Councillor Santos is the council sponsor on this announcement. Welcome, Kina.
Kina, you have joined the session. You can unmute your microphone and please address the committee.
Hello, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction. I am Kena Sarkar, the founder and lead of Girl Up Brampton, and I am here in honor of the International Day of the Girl. Girl Up Brampton is a chapter of the International Girl Up campaign, which was launched by the United Nations Foundation in 2010. We believe we can change the world one girl at a time, and our mission is to educate, advocate, serve, and fundraise for women all over the world. Girl Up Brampton is a nonprofit organization run by youth who are passionate about issues such as gender-based violence, gender gap in STEM and sports, and menstrual equity, to name a few. Our upcoming initiatives include a hygiene drive for women in shelters who have been victims of abuse. We will be collecting and donating sanitary products as well as hand sanitizers in accordance to COVID-19 needs. We will also be holding a fundraiser for the education of impoverished girls in developing countries in the upcoming months. Moreover, Girl Up hosts a global 5K every year in May, which is to raise awareness for women's health and safety and funds for them in developing countries. And we're proudly bringing that to Brampton in 2021. We welcome you all to be a part of our initiatives and campaigns and invite you to help out in any capacity you can. You can visit our pages on Instagram and Twitter at Girl Up Brampton, or you can contact us via email, and our email is girlupbrampton@gmail.com. We would love for any of you to get involved. And lastly, thank you, Councillor Santos, for sponsoring Girl Up Brampton, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sarkar. I have Councillor Santos who wishes to address the announcement. Councillor.
Thank you so much, Kena, for joining us. And for Girl Up Brampton, the International Day of the Girl is on October the 11th, and I'll be walking with a group of women at Forks of the Credit. Last year, we highlighted the girls' empowerment movement, and this year, I'm so pleased that Girl Up Brampton is joining us today. Just so that councillors and the public know, the International Day of the Girl 2020 will be focusing on a few demands for girls in particular around the world to live free from gender-based violence, harmful practices, and HIV and AIDS, learn new skills towards futures they choose, and lead as a generation of activists accelerating social change. And I'm very proud that Girl Up Brampton is one of those organizations. So thank you, Kena, for joining us today.
Thank you, Councillor Santos, and thank you, Ms. Sarkar. Thank you, everyone. And now we'll move on to regular agenda business. Our next item is 6.1, Government Relation Matters. Blaine Lucas is here with a presentation for committee on our government relations file. Welcome, Blaine.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'd like to start with a short overview of the regional business for this week. So if we move on to the second slide. There's a public meeting on developmental charges at and the regional council meeting immediately following the public meeting. Regional council agenda was reviewed by the public affairs staff for any comments or recommendations. While there are a number of for information reports, the majority are regional specific, which or have a low impact on regular city business. I'd like to point your attention to item 10.1, the staff presentation on rodent mitigation, control, and prevention plan. The pest control subsidy framework and study was received yesterday, and at the time of the presentation was distributed, we did not have a copy. So the information is available. We recognize that this has been an issue raised at council on previous meetings. The regional report is detailed and includes a financial analysis. So please let the public affairs team know if any additional briefing notes are required or would be beneficial to members of council. Lastly, staff did monitor last week's Policy and Procedure Committee, specifically regarding the regional composition review. At this point, Peel Regional staff are collecting further information or further data to inform discussions at the next meeting. Okay, if we can move forward to the next slide. Alrighty, so we're moving on to provincial government issues. Last week, the province published its full $2.8 billion COVID-19 fall preparedness plan. Since then, further targeted measures to limit the spread of COVID-19 in Peel, Ottawa, and Toronto have been announced, effective October 3rd. Also, the province announced further $35 million to further enhance the safety of students and staff in Peel, Ottawa, Toronto, and York region. Finally, I wanted to bring to members of council attention to the 2020 pre-budget consultation is now open through to October 16th. So we are working on our pre-budget submission based on the information that we presented through our AMO delegations. So given the short window, staff is drafting the city's submission, which has a 500-word limit. We're looking at, like I mentioned, excuse me, using the AMO documentation from our delegations to include in our short submission. We anticipate the provincial budget to be tabled by mid-November. If we can move on now to slide number 4. All right, the federal update. The federal government announced $10 billion over a 3-year investment in infrastructure through the Canada Infrastructure Bank's growth plan. To be clear, this is not new funding, but repackaging the government's previously announced $35 billion investment through the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Also last week, the federal government announced an additional $600 million through the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. Funding will flow through Canada's regional development agencies, including FedDev Ontario, which will receive an additional $184 million to support business in Southern Ontario. Well, this concludes our quick summary of the regional, provincial, and federal issues for this meeting of council. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Thank you, Blaine. That was very concise. And to that point, I see no questions on my board. So thank you for that presentation.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. I didn't change my to the host to all panelists when I put up my.
Very good, Councillor. Recognizing Councillor Paleshi, please proceed.
I think that's a little bit better. You'll see that one in there. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thanks for the GR update. I'm a little bit surprised why there isn't a breakdown of Bill 184. You clearly stated that it doesn't affect, no other items affected municipalities. I think we're going through a housing and homelessness strategy. So I think that, I think you should have done a breakdown of Bill 184, Blaine. And additionally, I would have liked to have seen the breakdown on the correspondence from Sylvia Jones, MPP for Caledon, to effectively see what that means and how that affects Brantonians as well. So if you have those available, I'd be glad to listen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Lucas.
Okay. Through the chair to the councillor, sir, we will. I do appreciate your feedback. We will get some information out to council, and we will submit it. We'll do our very best to get it to you by the end of the day, if that's appropriate.
Councillor Paleshi, any other comments or questions?
None. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Blaine. I have a motion moved by Councillor Paleshi to receive the presentation. All in favor, any opposed? That carries. Thank you. And our next item is 6.2, an update on the COVID-19 emergency. Mayor Brown will provide an update to council at today's meeting. I'd now like to invite the mayor to provide this update today. Mayor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. A quick update. I had a chance to speak a number of times over the last week to Premier Ford and spoke on Monday to Prime Minister Trudeau. A few things I would highlight. I expressed my concerns to them on testing, about the wait times for testing that I keep on hearing stories, feedback from constituents that the wait time to get your COVID test results are far too long. And so I wanted to make them both aware of that. And there is some help coming on October 16th. We're going to have local testing capacity that will grow from 150 a day to 800. And after that, it could grow to 1,600. That's the update from Dr. Naveed Mohammed. I mentioned that there are concerns that we're at the hospital testing, there's at least some predictability when you're going to get your test result back, but we don't have enough details of where the pharmacy tests are going to be processed and how long it'll take to get them back. So both the Prime Minister and the Premier are aware of those concerns. I was on a GTHA mayor's call on Monday where the mayors around the GTA in Hamilton talked about this potential resurgence in areas of concern. I would note Toronto right now is facing a real challenge with restaurants and nightclubs. That's not a challenge that we're seeing from our data in Peel region. We've had no onward transmission in a restaurant setting in Peel region. So I'm grateful that our restaurants are abiding by the advice of public health. I think in Toronto, where there is an active nightlife scene, it caused some real challenges for the city of Toronto. But we have a different dynamic in Peel region. It's why I put out a video this week highlighting some of the people that are facing the greatest risk. We know that we've had workplace outbreaks. We know that we've had workplace outbreaks with essential workers in the food processing sector and the transportation logistics. But it's not like this is by choice. This is not someone going to a backyard party. You know, as Dr. Lowe mentioned last week in our press briefing, these are essential workers. These are truckers going across the border, acquiring COVID in the United States, coming back and it affecting a household here. They didn't have a choice. Their work required them to maintain Canada's supply chains, to put food on the shelves at grocery stores. And so we've got some unsung heroes. And frankly, I think Brampton deserves more thanks for the number of residents that are stepping up, rising to the occasion to really help during this difficult period to maintain our supply chains. And Brampton has a huge food processing and transportation logistics sector. So I think there needs to be more awareness of that and appreciation for those unsung heroes. Today, the South Fletcher's testing center is closed because they're being winterized. So any hopes that testing will be wrapped up and this pandemic will be over shortly, I think that by virtue that they're now winterizing testing facilities will give you an indication that we're going to be in this for a while. But they're winterizing it over one day. So by tomorrow, they'll be operational again. And of course, we still have the testing available at Peel Memorial. And the province has now changed it to an appointment-based system. So that's a quick update over the last week, and I'm happy to answer any questions from members of council.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. And I think I speak for everyone on council. We truly appreciate your leadership in standing up for our essential workers here in the city of Brampton. My first speaker is Councillor Williams.
Hi, thank you. Through the chair, just have a few questions and to raise a matter that I've heard a number of small business owners who they're faced with a hard decision right now to close their businesses, of course, due to revenue loss, but also because their landlords did not apply for the rent relief. Or they applied for the rent relief through the CECRA fund, but refused to pay the 25%. So some tenants are being forced to pay 50% of the rent during that whole period. So I've heard some stats for Ontario that about 1 in 5 businesses are really facing this. So I'm just wondering to the staff, do we know what our numbers are in Brampton? I'm wondering if Claire is here or somebody can answer that question.
Hi, good morning. Claire is here. The data isn't available at the Brampton level. We know anecdotally that there were many issues with that program and many small businesses in the city faced that very issue that you just raised. We have heard that the federal government is now working on a new aid program that will subsidize rent for businesses without having to have the engagement or without having their landlords directly apply for it. So we know that there's something that's being worked on and we can share as soon as we hear any details. That's not available just yet. There's also a FedDev program that is available for small businesses that fell through the cracks with all of that funding from the federal government during COVID. So please have any businesses connect with either the Entrepreneur Center team or myself, and we can provide any of that information and help them with the applications. As well as yesterday, the provincial government released a red tape fall package that we're just working through now to see how that might help small businesses especially. And that is really part of their plan for economic recovery in the province. So if you would like to refer any small businesses to myself or the entrepreneurship team, we can absolutely help them through that.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Thank you, Claire. So the plan that is going to be coming forward, is that plan, will it be retroactive for the tenants who did not get the rent relief through their landlord, or will it be a go-forward basis?
I'm sorry, we don't have those details yet. They just announced that they're working on this, but what might be available is the FedDev funding. So we really encourage companies to look at that, or small businesses to look at that funding.
Okay, thank you. So, outside of maybe, writing a letter of support or advocating, because we know this is a matter that can only really be solved on a federal and a provincial level, is there anything else we could do through the economic task force, maybe an information session just for small businesses? Is that something we can look at?
Sure, of course, we can look into that. We can have, we can look at what the BEC programming is for the coming weeks and see what already might exist. But also we might be able to have a special program with the task force and the Entrepreneur Center to ensure that what funding is still available for businesses, that the small businesses are aware and that we can help them. We can take that on.
Oh, that's great to hear, because I'm really concerned. A number of businesses have reached out and discussed the fact that it's October 1st. The CECRA program ended but was extended for 1 month, but many small businesses are really facing the strain. And then a number of businesses have said to me that they made arrangements with their landlords, the ones that would not apply for the fund, and so they are now having to back pay their rent, and then faced with full rent moving forward as of October. So this is really concerning, especially for Brampton. Small businesses do fuel our economy here, and I think we really need to advocate for our small businesses. So to the mayor, just thinking thoughts on writing a letter of advocacy and support, especially to stress the importance of having that plan that is being developed to be retroactive, so that some tenants who did not have the rent relief or ended up having to use their loan to pay rent, if they could have that recouped. Just to the mayor and to my colleagues, what your thoughts on that, and if
So, Councillor Williams, I think that's a good idea. Why don't we have a letter sent by myself and the co-chairs of our Economic Development Task Force that we can send it to the federal government, that the current rent relief subsidy wasn't easily accessed. I've heard problems that the take-up was very minimal, and that we're hoping that they can do something more. If they are developing a program, that's good, but we can just highlight that we have a lot of small businesses, mom and pop shops that are at the brink right now, and that the current programs that were created simply didn't work. There's lots they've done well during the pandemic, but the rent relief program, it just didn't work. I've heard left, right, and center that people's landlords were not able to get it, or chose not to because they didn't feel it met their needs. When you hear a program that has such low intake, there's obviously problems with it. A program that has a high level of participation is one that's more successful. So maybe we could get a motion directing myself and the co-chairs of the Economic Development Task Force to write that letter on behalf of the city. So it follows with an official motion of council.
I'm happy to move that.
The co-chairs are Councillor Vicente and Pelushi. Would you have any concerns with that, either councillor?
I think it would be great. It's coming from the task force, and that's perfect. I'm happy to move that, and yeah.
Councillor Pelushi and Councillor Vicente, you're good with that?
Yes, thank you. The motion will be up on the board, and if you're done, Councillor Williams, I'll move on to my next speaker, and the motion will be under consideration as well.
Thank you. Through the chair, if we could have a recorded vote on that motion, and I am finished. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor. Next, I have Councillor Paleshi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So no concerns on that motion. I had a similar question though, but flipped over to the housing side of it, where Bill 184 talks about it. But we've been hearing that some landlords are increasing the rates and even increasing their eviction rates of people that can't afford the rent on the housing side of it. So do we have any comments from staff on so what City of Toronto has directed the city solicitor to commence a challenge of some sort of legislation that will take action to seek suspension of the effect? Do we have anything like that in the municipality, or are we just hoping that the region does that?
So while our city solicitor is coming on the call, Councillor Paleshi, I would just note the City of Toronto does have their own act. Every other municipality in Ontario is governed by the Ontario Municipal Act, but they have the City of Toronto Act. And so I know a lot of this for us would be governed under the Landlord and Tenant Act, but if there's, the Premier has said there'll be no evictions during this pandemic. And so if there's a way that we can help tenants that are being evicted or having their rent increased at a time when people cannot sustain it, would love to hear if there's any way, any other solutions that other municipalities have had to help tenants.
Okay, I guess then that's something we can talk about tomorrow at the region. I guess my question though to staff would be: do we get any notifications of any types of evictions? Do we have any data at the city? Do we track it at all?
So what staff member is that to, Councillor Paleshi?
Anybody that would know the answer? Peter, do you know of any, if landlords have to, when they post evictions or anything, do we get a notification?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think so. That's between two private entities. So the municipality doesn't, unless the municipality is a property owner, which we're not,
Right.
we do not get involved and do not receive notice.
Okay. So then back to what Councillor Williams was talking about. I recently ran into a little bit of an issue up in, I know the mayor's office was dealing with it back in March. And unfortunately, there's nothing we could do about it. He owns a small business. He also owns a home in Heart Lake, raises his family. But his landlord basically scared him into doubling his rent right in the worst possible part of this pandemic in March. He chooses to remain nameless because he doesn't want anything to come back on him because of the almost bullying tactics that the landlord used, and it was literally double of his rent that they increased it to. On the city side, do we have anything that can help somebody like that with their landlord, or do we just fall back on what the Premier had said? Nobody's rent is going to be increased. Nobody's going to get evicted over this pandemic.
So I think what we could do, Councillor Paleshi, is given that's the provincial order right now from the Premier, the Landlord and Tenant Act would enforce this. And so if we could let people know how they can contact the Landlord and Tenant Act tribunal, how you can register a complaint, because what happened to your constituent should never have happened. And so maybe what we can do is help with that. Maybe we can identify who the contact is at the Landlord and Tenant Tribunal, and we can advertise better how people can report a landlord who is in breach of their obligations.
Okay. I guess, Mr. Mayor, how do we really help somebody like this who's has to be held to the landlord? You know, when this is all done, there's nothing that this landlord can stopping this landlord from going to the person to say, okay, you have 2 months to leave now.
So under the provincial regulation, they're not allowed to do that.
They're not allowed to increase the rent. They're not allowed to evict. So once the pandemic's over, because this landlord can turn around and rent this unit out tomorrow. What would stop him from doing that when the pandemic's over?
But they can't rent it out if someone's already in the unit.
Right, but after the pandemic's over and they evict them because they've caused a problem.
Well, if I may, Mayor, just to help out here in this situation, I think the motion captures that we are looking for the provincial government to do what they can in terms of reform of legislation to seek help for disputes between landlords and tenants. I think that is captured here, and we could spend all day if we want to discuss exactly how the province can do that. But they have their legal teams, and I think that it is appropriate for us to ask for them to consider this. This is a priority for us and for our residents. And I think beyond that, we may just be wasting time here.
Okay. I don't think it's wasting time, Councillor Vincente, but I agree that, you know, the next steps, this is the avocation that needs to take place. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Very good. And next, I have Councillor Williams on the board. Councillor, do you have an additional point to make?
You forgot about me, Councillor.
Yeah, no, I was just writing a comment. I'm not on the board.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, the floor is yours.
Yeah, through you, Chair, to the Mayor, maybe when he's advocating, I know we talked briefly about this. We've got some people that have done the good thing and had taken tests that work in the private industry that are essential workers, but now have taken some tests and are forced to stay at home until they get the results back. I don't think the wait time is that much of a concern for a lot of these residents. 4 or 5 hours to make sure you're clear and free to go back to work. That's not really much to ask for, but it's the time afterwards, 4, 5, 6, 7 days afterwards, just to find that you are negative or positive, either way, but that's just unacceptable. So if maybe you can advocate for getting the results back quicker to these essential workers that basically are a lot of them are in the logistic industry, like you say, and private companies that have been deemed essential for through this COVID that have been going to work every day since March 15th. So maybe you could advocate for that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, Councillor Willens.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Thank you, Councillor Willens. I see no other speakers on my board. So first, Mr. Clerk, can we deal with the motion that requires a recorded vote?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So members of committee, the motion is on the screen. All those in favor, please indicate. Councillor Dillon has not joined the meeting yet. Councillor Singh?
Yep.
Councillor Fortini? Councillor Fortini?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Bowman?
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi?
Yes.
Councillor Willens?
Yes.
Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
Yes.
And Chair Vicente?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously 10-0.
Thank you, members of committee. And now I have a motion moved by Councillor Williams to receive the COVID-19 updates. All in favor, any opposed? That carries. Very good. Next, we have item 7.1, a delegation from Adrian Dingle, the Director of Reside Program, Raising the Roof, the proposed partnership between the City of Brampton and Raising the Roof. Welcome, Adrian. You have 5 minutes for your delegation.
Good morning, everyone. Your worship, members of City Council and staff. My name is Adrian Dingle, and I'm here today representing Raising the Roof, and more specifically, the Reside program that we have at Raising the Roof. Raising the Roof is a national charity focused on preventing and raising awareness around homelessness in Canadian communities. I'm here today to formally introduce the Reside program to Brampton as a means of simultaneously restoring municipally owned heritage buildings and providing localized social impact on an expedited timeline. Next slide, please. Reside's goal is to prevent homelessness and provide social impact through the renovation of vacant heritage buildings. We accomplish this in two main ways, by creating new, energy-efficient, affordable rental units, and also using the renovation efforts at these buildings to provide hands-on training in the trades to people experiencing barriers to employment in your community. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce to you the two key partner groups that we use in every Reside project. We work exclusively with social enterprise contractors. These are groups like Building Up, based out of Toronto. These groups are fully licensed contractors that use a combined labor force of experienced professionals and trainees seeking employment in construction to complete contracts. Once the units are completed, Raising the Roof works with a local social housing provider on an operational basis, and they will act as the property manager and the social support structure for the tenants at the building. So to recap the entire project, Reside acts as a developer, acquiring the property, facilitating the role of the project manager to ensure timely completion of the project, arranging financing and fundraising any additional required capital, negotiating the contract with the social enterprise contractor Building Up, and eventually leasing the space to the social housing provider. Next slide, please. Reside is a national program, but Brampton was recently brought to my attention by Robert Hulley, who's a former member of the Brampton Heritage Board. He claims to have identified a group of municipally owned heritage buildings across Brampton that he believes should be restored. I understand that not all of these properties are likely to be suitable for a program like this, but I'll also mention that although the Reside program has been successful at redeveloping heritage buildings in the past, this is not the only type of property that we are capable of repurposing. If there is an interest on behalf of the council and your worship to implement the Reside program within Brampton, in terms of partnership from the city of Brampton, we would request the following. Firstly, some help in identifying some vacant municipally owned real estate assets that would be suitable for the Reside program. These properties can be made available to Reside through donation in kind or a full or discounted purchase of the assets by Raising the Roof. In addition to this, we would be looking for cooperation to create a joint application to the Rapid Housing Initiative. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this, but for those of you who are not, this fund was recently this fund was recently announced as the release of over $1 billion that is meant to fund the acquisition and renovation of projects exactly like this across Canada. And we think that it's going to be important for major projects that Reside is taking on in the future. In exchange for these partnership options, here's what Reside can provide. We can create new affordable housing units on an expedited timeline in as little as 6 months from the permitting to completion and move-ins. We can also create new employment opportunities for up to 20 people per bedroom of housing created. Building Up has a rate of 85% of their trainees moving on from their trainee experience to find apprenticeships or long-term employment opportunities in the trades. And all of this can be available to little or no cost to the city of Brampton if we were to move forward. Next slide, please. We have several affordable projects completed with tenants moved in across the GTA and Caledon, although this is a recently designed program since about 2018. We have a new project underway in Toronto and a few in Caledon that we're just working on now. Raising the Roof is a very well-known charitable organization. I'm sure you guys are familiar with our TOOT campaign. We have a long history of strong funding relationships and, as I mentioned, our popular annual clothing fundraiser. Some of our major partners include RBC, Home Depot, CMHC, and we have worked previously with the Region of Peel on some of our Caledon projects. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. I think I've kept it to less than 5 minutes. I'm happy to field any questions. Otherwise, if members of council are interested in learning more, I'd be happy to arrange a further conversation.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I have a question from Councillor Paleski.
Thank you, Adrian. So I think I'd like to find out what the ask is, or is it just you're here to kind of let us know what are some of the things that are happening?
Well, I can elaborate a little bit for you. The ask is there's this portfolio of heritage buildings that's been identified. I think that there's 22 properties that Robert has identified previously. And I know that, in a previous conversation with Councillor Vicente, it's obvious that some heritage assets are retained for purposes of municipal need, and they might not be necessarily appropriate for a project like this. What I'm looking for is help in identifying of those municipally owned assets that are identified by Robert, as well as any other municipally owned assets that you have that you think would be suitable for this project. I'd like to enter into additional discussions about those and the potential purchase or donation of them to the Reside program in order to have these social impacts. I think that to elaborate a little bit more on my second component of the ask, that is the joint application to the Rapid Housing Initiative. Oftentimes, an organization like us, an affordable housing developer, would be coming to municipalities with, open hands saying, please donate the property, please give us a break on property taxes, please, help us make our development more feasible through financial means and donations. But due to the availability of this federal funding, we ask instead that you would just participate as a joint partner with us in the application process to the federal government. This is a pretty serious amount of money for the affordable housing sector, and we believe that our projects are extremely targeted and very much what the federal government is looking to encourage by way of this fund.
Sure. So recently, it was actually a few years ago, we reached out to Raising the Roof through with myself and Councillor Downey up in Caledon to see if we could figure out something with a heritage home in Brampton that was really close in an unsafe area. Okay. And so it kind of went away a little bit. But I guess my question is, if the city was to donate, or if we were to be able to negotiate a donation of the home to Raising the Roof, does Raising the Roof, is it expected by us then that Raising the Roof would come in, look at the property to see what they could do to move the property, to move the actual structure?
That's not really our kind of like main business model, but depending on the property and the location, that's something that we have, considered as an option before. We don't have land holdings of our own in Brampton, so we wouldn't really have anywhere to move it. But if there was a corresponding piece of property where that heritage home could be more suitable, then that could definitely work. I'm not sure which project you're speaking about in Brampton, just because I'm relatively new at Raising the Roof. I've come on in the last 6 months. Okay. But yeah, no, that's not the kind of main part of our business model. Mostly we're here to revitalize the space where it is, but there are kind of extenuating circumstances that can allow us to move the building if that's necessary.
For sure. And I think what we were talking about was the partnership that you had with Caledon, and it was a piece of property up there that I think was the partnership between you and them, or yeah, you owned it, or something to the effect, and then you were trying to get some buildings to put on this property. So that's kind of where we were. I
think I know what you're talking about, and that option actually is still available. That property is just south of Palgrave, and we have a single heritage church that has been restored there, but I believe there are additional land holdings. So in that sense, I believe that it's not so much the distance that you move a house that affects the cost, but the number of utilities that you cross. I'm not sure of the cost and whether that would be feasible, but I think that's the property that you would be alluding to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Adrian. And I guess, Adrian, for the more serious question, recently Raising the Roof went through a little bit of turmoil. You've been on for 6 months, so you may be coming in after that. And so there was some negative stuff that was happening with Raising the Roof, but I believe that you've partnered with somebody else. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure how negative it is, but I know that there was a major period of kind of overturn at Raising the Roof and turnover. The new executive director of Raising the Roof is Mark Salvarano. He's hiring on a kind of new young team, including myself. I have a background of about 5 years of residential real estate development experience. I'm coming from the private sector, and I've been chosen specifically for this role in order to take the Reside project and scale it massively across Canada. So we're already seeing some significant growth. We're just hiring a new fundraising manager, and we have a new kind of a team going on. So you're correct, it is a little bit of a rebirth for the organization. But as a part of that rebirth, the main focus now of the organization in terms of the homelessness prevention component of Raising the Roof's mandate is this Reside program. And yeah, there was some turnover on the board and as well as within the staff, but there are also members of staff and the board that have stayed on board, and we're very much growth focused right now.
Okay. Last question through you, Mr. Chair, to the delegate. I could only find the financials for Raising the Roof dating to 2017. Any idea why those aren't publicly available?
I believe that 2018 and 19 are available on our website and 2020 is underway. I'd be happy to provide them to you myself if that would be helpful.
Thanks, Adrian. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, I have Councillor Willens.
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you, Adrian, for coming in. I see that Derek Boyce has given us something in the chat line here. I think we should carry on the conversation. We do have last term of council. We had some other members of our community wanted to do exactly the same thing. So I think it's important that maybe we can look at if the staff can come back to another committee, as Peter's suggesting here, to talk more about it, because it's a great idea. And I think we just had to identify the buildings. I know a lot of that is talked about in closed session, so we'd have to identify which ones we could do it on. We have identified a few. Councillor Bowman was very interested in working with the group last term of council, so I think we should carry on the conversation. I think it's great. It does bring people into the workforce and does do a good job with providing some housing for people that are trying to get back on their feet. So thank you for coming in, Adrian.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Willens, and thanks, Adrian, for handling those questions. I hope that this was productive. So we have a motion moved by Councillor Willens to receive your delegation and refer the request to staff for report back. All in favor, any opposed? And that carries. Thank you, Mr. Dingle.
Thank you.
Members of committee, we have our next delegation, which was withdrawn, so therefore we will move on to item 8.2.1, a staff report regarding the 2020 Advanced Brampton Fund and COVID-19 Relief Fund with a funding update. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report?
I'm happy to move this, Mr. Chair.
The report has been moved. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, I have a motion moved by Councillor Paleski to receive the reports. All in favor or any opposed? And that carries. Next, we have item 8.5, Councillor question period for this section of the agenda. Do any members of committee have any questions? Seeing none, we now move on to public question period. Mr. Clerk, have we received any questions from members of the public with regards to any item in this section of the agenda?
There are no questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So now I'll pass the chair over to Councillor Singh to chair the corporate services section of committee's agenda. Councillor Singh.
Thank you. Starting the corporate services section, moving on to 9.2.1 is a staff report regarding purchasing activity quarterly report second quarter 2020. Do any members have any question or comments regarding the staff report? If so, please use the chat function to add your name to the speakers list. Yes, I see Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of questions about some of the contracts and what they really entail. If you go to number 20 on the list, it's develop a roster of vendors to provide catering services for a 3-year period, and that's $900,000. Does that include the payment to the caterers, or is it as it says, just to develop that roster?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll address that. It's Peter.
Yeah.
City Hall and the clerk's office, in particular for council and committee meetings, and this was all pre-COVID, we established a roster of potential caterers to supply food for various meetings, whether of council committees, some of the advisory committees, or other meetings that occur in City Hall. And this is just an upset limit, and there's only charges when actual services are requested by each of these vendors.
Okay, thanks, Peter. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just $900,000 to develop that roster, so thank you. And if we move on to item 29, maintenance control for traffic lights and signals related electrical devices for a 5-year period. That's $15 million. Do we spend on average, $3 million a year on maintaining our traffic signals?
This is Commissioner Davidson. I'm going to move that over to one of my staff members, Diane Oliveira. Could you speak to that, please, Diane?
Thanks, Michael. Through the chair, I do think that question would be more, sorry, could everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I do think that question would be more appropriate to be directed to the Commissioner of Public Works or one of the staff from traffic.
Very good. One from Works available.
Good morning, everybody. So I believe that's the case. The 50 million would be for the full amount, and this is just for the first year. So I believe that's the case, Councillor Bowman, but I'd be happy to go back and get more information if you wish.
Okay, yeah, if you could, Jane. It just seems, I don't know, $3 million a year to maintain traffic signals just seems a little high to me, but I don't know. I could be way off.
Yeah, so Councillor Bowman, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I just got confirmation that, yes, that is the case, that we do spend that much in maintaining our traffic signals a year.
Wow. Because if you add that to item number 33, pavement marking services, we're spending $17 million with one supplier. So I hope we're getting our money's worth, but I will leave that to you guys to figure out.
Yeah, and it is a competitive tender, Councillor Bowman. So we do go out for tender to make sure that we are getting good value for our money.
Okay, and Jane, you might as well stay on the line because I've got number 35 to road resurfacing.
Yes.
That's all it says. There's no real details to it. It just says road resurfacing. Almost $14 million to.
That's right. So through the chair, Councillor Bowman, this is our annual resurfacing program. So we go out for a competitive tender, and this is the road resurfacing. Sometimes we do 40 to 50 streets a year. We start in spring and we try to finish in fall. So it's basically the road resurfacing throughout the city. So you'll recall that before COVID, we used to meet with all the councillors in the spring just to let them know which roads were going to be resurfaced in their ward. And it's an annual program, and it's based on our asset management program.
Okay, thanks, Jane. And who used to have that contractor? Can we ask that question?
Who used to have it's every year it's tendered out, so that's a competitive tender that goes out every spring. That's why we try to get that one out early. You'll recall that a lot of times we come to council with a report sometimes prior to budget being approved, because that's one of the tenders that we like to get out on the street early so we can get the best prices. So every year it goes out for a competitive tender.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Just one more question on this one. I know Councillor Fortini is the expert on this, but I believe he asked last year about putting wording into the contract about guarantees of the type of asphalt used and the length of time that asphalt would be good for. Did we do that this time?
I'd have to double check the wording, but I can get back to you on that. I know we have very stringent specifications in our contracts. For that question in particular, Councillor Bowen, I'd have to just go back and check with my staff.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Just two more. Item number 45, Alex. I guess that's you, and I just don't know whether this is a mistake or not. It says upgrade to Hastis 2010 software for Brampton Transit. Are we updating to 2010 when we're going into 2021?
And through the chair, very good question, Councillor Bowman. And no, our apologies for the way it's worded. The 2010 version is the foundation of many different modules, the other 10 modules. The new auto bid modules, which is the procurement that's there, is an additional module into that old 2010 version. But the modules that we're putting in are the current modules, if that makes sense.
No, perfect sense, Alex. I just didn't want to, I didn't want to be updating to 2010 and be 11 years behind. So thank you.
Thank you.
Final question. The Christmas lights that are going up all around the city, that's number 89 and 92. That's a tender, $1.6 million. Is that a 3-year tender? Is that tender over this year? Can somebody shed some light, some Christmas light on that for me?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Dark Boyce speaking. I believe I'll have to get back to you, Councillor Bowman. I know Rob sent an email to me before he left on this item, so I'll get back to you. But I think it's expiring soon, so I don't think it's a long-term contract. But I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks very much, Derek, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question with regards to purchasing. Something that I guess I noticed is that there are a few numbered companies listed here as providing either a product or service to the City of Brampton. Does the City of Brampton normally allow a numbered company to supply a bid and provide service to our city?
Commissioner Davidson here. I would have to defer that over to my acting director in purchasing.
Thanks, Michael. Through the chair, there are no restrictions in our purchasing bylaw in terms of restricting numbered companies in providing services to the City of Brampton.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Chair, if a resident is going through this list and would like to know more information about any of these organizations or corporations, they can certainly look them up. But in the case of a numbered company, it's a little bit obfuscated in terms of what information you'd find. So how can we assure in future that more transparency is provided?
Certainly what we could do is, in addition to the numbered information that is provided in the report, we can include the business name of the company. And that would provide more information to the public.
Okay, thank you. And final question, Mr. Chair. We have a number of emergency contracts that were, or purchases that were arranged for, and it looks like certainly all through COVID. But going forward, when it comes to COVID-related items, would it be our expectation that we will be going through a bidding process in the future for these types of items?
Diane, could you address that? It's Commissioner Davidson.
Sure. Through the chair, you're correct, Councillor. A number of those emergency purchases were directly related to COVID. We do have current contracts that can address some of the PPE requirements in regards to industrial supplies and our office supplies. Those current contracts were through a competitive process.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions. Thanks, Doc.
All right. Thank you. Seeing that there are no other speakers, I have a motion from...
Mr. Chair, I'm on the board.
Oh, yes, I see you. Okay. Sorry about that, Councillor Pellecci.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did just throw my name up there. But just building off of what Councillor Vicente was talking about, with respect to the numbered companies, I think an easy question to ask on the documents would be just operating as question. And when I owned a company, it was a numbered company, but we were always operating as. So maybe if we could have that in the report, 1-2 blah 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 Ontario Inc. operating as the name, I think that would be beneficial for us and maybe the residents, is what Councillor Vicente is referring to. Also with the I lost my train of thought. The last comment you made, Councillor Vincente, was to the effect, can you come back on, please? Through you, Mr. Chair, can I have Councillor Vincente come back on?
I am always present, Councillor.
The last comment that you made, last question.
Oh, I believe I asked with regards to the emergency purchases and whether or not going forward those purchases would be go through a tender process, as we now or know that we require these services or products.
Thank you, Councillor. And I believe that the emergency order speaks to how we in emergency situations, a procurement process is not needed to a certain extent. But that being said, maybe in the future when we have reports, and maybe I'll turn this question over to Mr. Barrick, because I think there was a discussion about a report coming back with the funding or monies being issued to tenders related specifically to COVID. Are we going to have a report come back, or should that be something I could ask for?
Thank you, Councillor, through the chair. So yes, you are correct. We are working on that report right now. It will be comprehensive, notwithstanding the emergency is still ongoing, but we will have a kind of checkpoint in time to be able to provide an update. We do have the financials line by line as committed previously that are in the appropriate emergency cost centers. We'll be providing that information as well. The timing, I believe, should be the end of this month or the very beginning of November.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Mr. Barrick. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I think our transit manager, Alex, would like to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Singh. And just to clarify for Councillor Bowman, my apologies. We got so many projects here. I think I misinformed you on that one. The actual item number 45, apart from our 2 auto bid modules that we're adding, sorry, that amount for 45 was to upgrade our software from 2010 version to 2020 version. So thank you for that. And so I apologize for the misinformation earlier.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Are there any more speakers on this item? Thank you. I have a motion by Councillor Vicente to receive the report. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Thank you. There are no objections, so the motion carries. Our next item is 9.2.2, a staff report regarding Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Program, City of Brampton facilities. Do any members have any questions or comments regarding the staff report? If so, please use the chat function to add your name to the speakers list. Okay, seeing there are no speakers, I have a motion by Councillor Fertini to approve the report recommendations. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Mayor Brown, go ahead.
If I could just say briefly, in terms of this accessibility certificate, I had met Rick Hansen at the Big City Mayors Conference in Ottawa, and he was hoping that the city of Brampton would pursue this. I just want to say I'm really glad that our staff pursued this, that we've been successful in initiating this, and hopefully we're going to really improve accessibility in the city. I think Rick Hansen is a Canadian hero, and just wanted to say a great job to our city staff for pursuing this so quickly.
Awesome, thank you. Seeing no other comments, I'll have a motion by Mayor Brown to approve the report recommendations. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Thank you. There are no objections, so the motion carries. Moving on to our 3 discussion items, starting with 9.3.1 is a discussion item at the request of Councillor Bowman on the Ontario Building Code and Secondary Unit.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My button still says unmute, so I'm hoping everyone can hear me here. I just want to follow up. Last month, I had asked the mayor to ask our premier for a meeting so that he'd come to Brampton and see the situation with our housing units here. And I know that we're in COVID, and I know that both the mayor and the premier have a very busy agenda. So what I've also heard was that last week in Mississauga, Councillor Rass put forward a motion which is almost identical to what I've been trying to get done in the city of Brampton for quite a while now. So what I would like to do, I've put together a motion, and I believe everybody was sent that this morning. I will read it. It's amendments to the Ontario Building Code, building inspector entry provisions. Whereas the City of Brampton's building and enforcement staff have received a number of complaints regarding property owners who may be converting a house from a single-family dwelling to a multi-unit dwelling without a permit, but have experienced difficulty obtaining entry to carry out inspections. Whereas these conversions and renovation projects are potentially putting occupants at risk due to poor construction and contravention of the fire code. Whereas there's a prevalence in illegal construction activities across the City of Brampton in recent years. Whereas, according to Section 12 of the Ontario Building Code, the inspector may enter upon land and into buildings at any reasonable time without a warrant for the purpose of inspecting the building or site to determine whether or not the Act and the Building Code have been complied with. And if contraventions are found, they may make orders directing compliance. Whereas, according to Section 16 of the Act, an inspector shall not enter or remain in any room or place actually being used as a dwelling without consent of the occupier, notwithstanding Section 12 right of entry. And whereas there are instances where building and enforcement staff require access into a dwelling to determine if the Act and Building Code are being complied with, whereas the city's building and enforcement staff are mindful of the privacy rights of residents related to dwellings, but also understand that there are examples where access into dwellings is justified as set out in the example in exemptions described in Section 16 of the Act. Whereas I have written and spoken to the Premier of Ontario, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and to the Solicitor General over the past 2 years with no response or commitment or action from the province. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mayor of the City of Brampton send a letter on behalf of Council with a copy of this resolution to the Honourable Stephen Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, requesting that Section 16 of the Ontario Building Code Act be amended to allow inspectors to enter into dwellings to ensure compliance with the Act where the inspector has reasonable grounds to believe that construction has or is taking place within the dwelling for the purpose of creating an additional rentable occupancy space without a permit. Further, a copy of the letter be sent to the Premier of Ontario, the Solicitor General of Ontario, and members of Peel Regional Council. And I would like a recorded vote.
All right. Thank you. I see Councillor Medeiros. You have the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Thank you, Councillor Bone, for bringing this forward. I guess a couple of things I raise here about this. I think, one element is certainly being highlighted, but there are other elements which has been discussed about, for example, the role of the courts, the role of and specifically around the justice of the peace, in terms of what the fines are. There's also amendments that we could make to the Building Code and Zoning Act to allow issuances of administrative monetary penalties. So I think that if we're going to send a letter on behalf, or have the mayor and council, or the mayor send a letter on behalf of council, apologies, we would want a more fulsome sort of inclusion of all elements. So what I'd like to do this is refer, and I don't know, City Clerk, maybe you can articulate this in a better way, but the spirit is essentially I'd like to refer this back to staff. And when I mean staff, that would be, I guess, our building, so Rick Kennard's group, and also our bylaw, to ensure that all the elements of what, provincial intervention that could be, that would help us deal with this issue. Secondly, I would say that a motion which Councillor self-identifies himself, and understandable, Councillor Bowman's been passionate about this issue, but I think all councillors have been working on this issue in different aspects. Some might not publicly describe that they've written the Premier, or they're speaking to the Premier, they're speaking to ministers. I think all of us in one way are doing this. So I'm not sure. I think that there's a reflection of all of council who's dealing with this issue. I know many of the residents that maybe Councillor Bowman are in contact with myself. And so I think that going back to staff to have a more sort of comprehensive sort of input in terms of us sending a letter to the province, which we will be all encompassing, and really task the mayor. And I think this is one of the problems that when it comes to government relations, as much as I think all of us are passionate about issues, when it comes to effectiveness, to be quite frank, nothing is more effective than if your leader, in this case our mayor, is the one spearheading this activity. So that's an aside, but essentially I'd like to refer this back to staff instead of focusing on one element, to come back with a suggested sort of draft letter which would incorporate sort of everything that we would want so we can tackle the issue of basement apartments.
All right, thank you, Councillor Medeiros. So are you putting an amendment to the...
Well, it's no amendment now, and this is why I need the city clerk's, I need Peter's sort of assistance, because essentially, in terms of the direction about a letter is fine, but not just on one element. I would want it referred back to staff to have a more comprehensive sort of fulsome letter, which incorporates other sort of aspects of, I guess, the issue of illegal basement dwellings and et cetera, which includes entry, which includes courts, fines, all that. So that's essentially what I want to do, refer it back. And then if I need to make amendments after, that's a different, do you understand the spirit, Peter?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, Councillor, effectively, you're moving a referral motion of this motion back to the Chief Building Official and Enforcement and Bylaw Services to identify additional compliance and enforcement mechanisms to ensure a comprehensive approach to the issue of secondary units or basement apartments, and report back to committee with an appropriate draft letter for committee's consideration.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, and Councillor Bowman, do you accept this as a friendly, or would you, if you don't, then I guess we'll vote on this first because it's an amendment.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, this is not a friendly amendment. This is a procedural amendment to not decide this today, but to refer it off.
Okay, so that would get voted on first, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, Mayor Brown?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Singh. Just to say, this is an ongoing problem we have in Brampton. We have too many illegal units, and in some cases we have landlords who are taking advantage of some of their most vulnerable residents. I've heard too many stories of 10 people in a basement apartment, international students being frankly taken advantage of, and we have to find the tools to give our bylaw team the ability to do their job. I've spoken to the provincial government about this. I've spoken to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Steve Clark, who this falls under. And so I'm going to continue doing that advocacy regardless of whether this motion is on the floor or not, but the motion certainly doesn't hurt. And so I welcome Councillor Bowman putting this on paper. I welcome Councillor Medeiros wanting to make it even stronger. Everything helps, but I want everyone to know what we're up against. Right now, the province is looking at creating new housing supply, so they're trying to make it easier for second suites. When I spoke to the Minister of Municipal Affairs about this, he actually said every other municipality is asking us for less regulations and you're asking us for more. So we have quite an advocacy job on our hand, and we're going to have to find a way to really make the province understand that we have a serious problem. Not that we don't want affordable housing options, not that we don't want second suites. We want safe second suites. We want second suites that are legally compliant. And so somehow we're going to have to convince the province that this is consistent with their goal of making it easier to have second suites, because we wouldn't want the rest of the province to have the same problem we have on our hand in Peel region. And so we've got an advocacy job to do here, and we're certainly not winning this argument right now with the province. If anything, I think they're in the process of making it easier. I believe we're going to start to see additional second suites pop up, not just in basements, but as part of their plan to be on top of garages, carriage houses. They're going to start to really normalize second suites all over properties.
All right. Thank you for your comments and commitment, Mayor Brown. Councillor Wellens?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if we should refer this back or defer it back, whatever we're doing. I guess refer it back. I think this is something we have to act on quickly, but if the mover of the original motion, Councillor Bowman's okay with referring it back for another report to come forward, I like Councillor Madero's suggestions. We do have to get all our ducks in a row. But just a quick comment. It's funny, less than a year ago, I attended a conference or a luncheon with the Swedish Consulate General, and I believe Councillor Bowman was with me, and Mayor Crombie was at the table, and she told us that they don't have illegal secondary units in Mississauga. So I kind of find it ironic that now all of a sudden they're coming forward. But anyway, I'm okay either way. I think it's a great idea. We got to keep advocating, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for continuing to advocate for us, because I know this is a very, very serious issue in Brampton.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wellens. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. Speaking to the referral, this should probably go back specifically to the task force, the illegal task force. And I'm just wondering how quickly they can bring this back, because the task force has been working on this for a year and a half, and I believe that they are very well versed in the laws and the acts of what needs to be changed. So I would like to see this come back as quickly as possible, possibly even by next council meeting. Is that possible?
Councillor, David here. So I guess it is possible is the short answer, but I think staff would prefer to have something back as they are reviewing their turnaround times, which might be another month or so. I'm not sure if Richard or Rick Kennard is on the line to be able to confirm 100%, but I understand the balance between wanting to get this back, but also wanting to provide council with the appropriate information that's being requested. So I'll leave it at that, if that's okay.
Is Rick on the line? Rick, I'm assuming, is part of the task force.
Through the chair, Richard, yes, Rick is on the line, and he can certainly provide some input in terms of the turnaround times. But this is a very important conversation for council, so I'll let Rick provide his thoughts in terms of turnaround time.
Thank you, Richard. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, I appreciate having the opportunity to speak to this. It is a very complex issue, as Mayor Brown mentioned. We ourselves have actually lobbied the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to consolidate the requirements under the Ontario Building Code to make the process easier, as you said, for registration of second units. Right now, the registration process or the compliance process is very complex in terms of all of the applicable requirements under the building code. The one thing that I can say about this particular motion is that it speaks specifically to our right of entry, which goes a long way in creating an efficiency for our inspectors when trying to gain access, particularly to the illegal second unit. There are hours and hours of time invested in putting together a search warrant, and it's always a mutual effort between the building division and enforcement and bylaw services, and the consolidated hours that go into to get in just to investigate the reported illegal second units. Is estimated around 10 hours per application. And as you know, we get hundreds and hundreds of complaints about illegal second units every year. And some of them we get into and some of them we don't. And so this motion speaks to easing that part of the process. The regulation aspect is a whole different ball of wax. And there does need to be some effort put in by the province on consolidating the requirements in the Ontario Building Code to create a specific second unit section in Part 9 of the building code, similar to what the National Building Code does. And that's the direction we've requested that the province go. And as I understand it, the province is looking at harmonizing the Ontario Building Code as much as possible with the National Building Code. So there is promise to that, but perhaps this does present us a good opportunity to reinforce our position on that, coming back with a more fulsome request to the province from the mayor on behalf of council. I think it is a good opportunity to bring in some additional information that we would like to see change in terms of the overall regulation of second units. And as our CAO mentioned, we have been inundated with the second units here in Brampton, and I can say that I've spoken with my colleagues in Mississauga, and their numbers from 2019 for registration of second units, I think it was 390 off the top of my head. And as you are well aware, we had over 3,000 in the city of Brampton. So we have a bit of a unique perspective on second units here in Brampton, and we have been leading the way in the GTA in terms of setting standards for submission requirements, draft designs for what designers could use as templates for submitting for second units. Those templates have been used in Milton and Mississauga. Markham also has a copy, although Markham is not in a position to legally allow second units yet. So, to keep it relatively short, we are doing our best to create as much efficiency in the process as we can in the building division. As David mentioned, we have several initiatives that we're hoping to be in place by the end of November. The end of October, beginning of November, that will reduce our timeframes. One of the aspects that we face a lot of criticism for, obviously, is the fact that we have a very effective enforcement review with the task force that is requiring people to come in and register the second unit. But with the sheer volume, we've been unable to keep up with every single time frame. So we do expect that by the end of the month, that will be remedied quite significantly. And I would appreciate, I guess, in light of the efforts we're putting into that, a little bit of an extension in time to consolidate what we think would be a good request to the ministry in terms of improving a more efficient process overall.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other questions, Councillor Bowman, before I move on to Councillor Medeiros?
Yes. As Rick said, this is our major impediment into getting into some of these places. And to be quite honest, I don't want this to get mixed up with when it goes back to the province, to get mixed up and have them come back to us and say, well, we've got to look at this in a holistic approach, and we've got to take the building codes and compromise and do this with our federal and our provincial codes. I want them to address this. This is what the issue is, and this is what is preventing us, and this is what is needed before we have a tragedy in this city where 13, 14, 15 people die in a fire because of safety codes. I don't want to wait any longer. We've waited long enough for this. It's been 2 years since I spoke to individuals at AMO, and nothing's been done. And I do not want to go another 2 years waiting for something to happen on this. This is important. This is about safety of the residents and about international students and about those people who are in affordable housing, and that's why they're using the basement apartments. I don't want this to get mixed up in a whole mishmash that's going to take years for the provincial or federal government to figure out. I want this addressed. And for that reason, I'm not supporting the referral. I want this to go forward. We can have another report come back with other things that we can petition the government for, specifically under the building code and not the Municipal Act. So I want this to go forward now. So I won't be supporting the referral. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and I appreciate the passion or the theater or in terms of whatever reference you would like to apply to this as anything, and I don't want to start challenging staff and getting into a big, I think all of us are trying to do the same thing. For us to tackle an issue which has all different aspects, especially about legal basement apartments, we need a comprehensive strategy. Part of my intent of doing this is that residents come up with us. I went to a resident meeting where there was probably 60 to 70 people in the backyard, social distancing, wearing their masks, all passionate about this issue. But there is a complex and a host of different set of issues that is all part of a strategy. So when we talk about, focusing on this one aspect, then we're forgetting other aspects. And even as a communication tool for our residents, they've asked me to sort of say, what exactly do we want the province to do? What exactly can we advocate? So part of this exercise, and this is why it's very timely that this was brought forward, was that what would we do would provide a letter, which would be some form of official letter by the mayor, which would be a comprehensive strategy about dealing with this, which encompasses other elements, which would also, from a communication perspective, be shared with residents who would like to write their MPPs. If we specify, and staff tell me right now that the number one issue and the only big issue dealing with illegal basement apartments is around right of entry, then I would challenge staff right now. I've heard from different staff tell me that also that in terms of right of entry, we actually, the chances of us even increasing the right of entry, we actually have one of the most, comprehensive or best point of entry, even better sometimes than police officers. So again, I don't want to get into a big debate of I just think that if we're developing a strategy, and all of us are all in the same sort of boat in terms of trying to deal with an issue which is an uphill battle, especially in wards 3 and 4, who I deal with residents. I'm living through the experience, and essentially we lose an opportunity by piecemealing, sending a letter on this aspect, then the other aspect of the penalties, the other aspect of the courts. So we're going to have 3 or 4 communication things out there when we're talking about a comprehensive strategy for the issue. So either we're going to be effective, because clearly after 2 years of speaking to people, be it at AIM or speaking one by one to whoever people are speaking with, it hasn't been effective. So if we think that one letter, I think there has to be a comprehensive letter which states what are the main points, which all of staff have reviewed, all of councillors can get by, and the mayor sends off. So the referral is on the floor, and I appreciate. I think this is an issue all of us are passionate about, because we're also frustrated, and all of us want us to ensure. But I would, make the case that if we start piecemealing this document and we're sending for one letter, then we're doing a disservice to residents who keep asking what are the other aspects that we need to, and we need a strong strategy when we're dealing with this. That's why we have a task force. So why wouldn't we have an all-encompassing letter which includes all aspects of the task force, not just one element? I think then we lose the opportunity and the effectiveness of what we're promoting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Mayor Brown.
Okay, I think we're all saying the same things, and it sounds like we're arguing when we're not. Councilor Medeiros, you're saying you want to have an all-encompassing letter to help us deal with these illegal suites. Councilor Bowman, you're making an impassioned plea about the fact that we've been trying for years and we haven't got through to the province. And so we're all saying the same thing. And what I would say is a resolution from council is not like this is going to be, the province will just follow it. We've got an uphill battle. And I actually think it's great that we're all on the same page, so there's no division in our city on the need for this to happen. And I get what Councillor Bowman's saying, that he wants it to happen as quickly as possible, and maybe we can hear from city staff that that's possible. If you pass it today, this is committee of council, it's not going to pass today. It'd have to go through council anyways. Maybe they can get this additional information within, by next week or the week after. And so I do think we can have this put together rather quickly, and maybe someone on the call, the CEOs listening, if you could speak to staff that you're hearing from council, we want this additional information put together as quickly as possible. If it's achieved by next week, then that wouldn't cause any delays, Councillor Bowman, because it could be incorporated next week. But what I would say is the same approach of us just writing letters isn't working with the province, and I worry that if we simply pass motions, then it's more of a PR exercise than us actually convincing and changing minds down at Queen's Park. And so what I think we should consider doing is they have to understand what this is really about. And sorry to give more work to city staff on this, but I wouldn't, I would love to be able to show the Minister of Municipal Affairs real examples. I know Chief Boyes, was talking to me about how heartbreaking for his firefighters when we had that basement fire that took a life. Well, maybe this letter should include attachments that include every basement fire we've had in a legal unit that has had a loss of life. Attach the newspaper articles. Attach the emergency response notes. Like there is, for those firefighters, for those first responders who had to go to the scene, there's going to be PTSD associated with that, potentially. This is a provincial government that supports our first responders. We'll let them know that our first responders were the first ones to complain about this and talk about it's a risk. This government wants to be the rallying behind our first responders. We'll understand they're the ones who are calling this out. And frankly, in some of those cases that we all know about, there's been some egregious examples. I know Paul Morrison has told me about examples of some of the worst cases of basement apartments. And we actually had that presentation to council, and they told us some examples. Well, maybe we can include this as an addendum to the letter too. So I think the more meat we add to this, the more ammunition we add to this letter, the more examples, the better it's going to be heard. And so what I'm saying is let's amplify our ask with more backup, more support, and let's do it in a way that is as fast as possible. So I think that would achieve what Councillor Medeiros is asking for, but also speak to the speed that Councillor Bowman is asking for. At the end of the day, every single member of council is on the same page on this. So let there be no mistake. This is not a division in the city. We want these tools from the province because it's about saving lives. It's about making sure people aren't taken advantage of. And I worry because we're arguing about a procedural matter that some people may have the impression that we're not all on the same page in this. We all are on the same page in this. No one in Brampton stands for a tenant being taken advantage of. No one in Brampton stands for people being pushed into an illegal second unit like they're sardines. No one in Brampton doesn't appreciate the grave concerns that our fire chief has and how this is a health and safety hazard. So hopefully we can all get on the same page on this. And if Councillor Medeiros' motion and if city staff could say, is it possible to get this back by next week? That way we're consistent, and maybe we can pass something at council that would get this off.
Through the chair, it's Richard, if I could just jump in.
Yes, please.
So yes, staff will endeavor to respond back to council with, I think it's important that we do have a comprehensive response to the province. This is a complex issue that we need to address in Brampton. I would also say that the good news is that we've seen an uptick in the number of people that want to apply through the process. And so in terms of getting the right process in terms of getting building permits and achieving fire codes and those kind of things. So from that perspective, we've made some great strides, and Rick will tell you that in June and July of this year alone, we saw more applications come in than we did from January through to June, just in that month when we allowed for removed the need for the driveway requirement for extra car. So we will endeavor to put together a comprehensive response to this issue, We'll try to get it for next Wednesday. If not, then it'll be the following. And I think this is an important conversation that we have to have, and that the province needs to hear, Brampton's experience on this.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, Mayor Brown?
The only other thing I'd mention is that I have been speaking to city staff about the backlog. I know right now there's a longer wait time to get compliant, and I know Richard and his team are working on a plan that we can cut that down, because I heard that the wait time is now 10 weeks, which is, in my opinion, way too long. I want to make it as easy as possible for people to become legally compliant, and so hopefully we're going to have a plan come forward soon to get that down to something more reasonable, like 2 weeks. And if additional resources are required, so be it. We need to make sure we make it as easy as possible to become a legal unit in the city, and we don't want wait times to deter people. We had a meeting about this just last week, and I want to thank Richard and his team for saying that they're going to work on this as quickly as possible, and we'll have solutions back to council shortly on how we're dealing with the backlog.
All right, thank you. Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Councillor Bowman and to Councillor Medeiros for leading here a very good conversation, in the sense that this has been an important priority for the city of Brampton for many years now, and we're looking for a solution that will work. And I, of course, fully agree with Councillor Bowman that this is important and that we need to move on it quickly. But I also agree with Councillor Medeiros' request for us to come back with a more, as Richard stated, a more comprehensive plan on how it is that we can facilitate and do inspections on properties more quickly. I'd like to note for members of council that there is a way to do this, and it's possible in the province of Quebec. Because of COVID, they, of course, deal with the same privacy laws that we have here. They are consistent across the country, and they were able to find a way to work with their local crown to obtain entry permits because of COVID. And that's not to say that we need to do an inspection within a few hours, but it would certainly be reasonable for us to work with a local judiciary to facilitate an inspection where, as others have indicated, there is a reasonable grounds to suspect that construction is happening. And so I believe every member should support that we put together a more well thought out and more holistic approach to this, if I can put it in that term. And this is important, not just for the mayor's advocacy to the province, but also as one of the members of AMO. I would like to be able to bring forward a well thought out approach, something that has gone through staff's close eyes and will actually gain support, not just from the province, but from all of the other municipalities in Ontario. And I think that we could leverage AMO and the fact that we are on the AMO board to advance this file and to finally come back with a solution. So I'm supportive of the referral, as I am supportive of the original motion, but I would like to see this done properly. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Medeiros?
Yeah, and just lastly, and I appreciate the mayor's words and everyone who spoke, Councillor Bowman, etc. Again, I wouldn't articulate it as us fighting, by no means, and I will take responsibility for, I think there are councillors who are passionate about this issue and we're frustrated about this issue. And, I still maintain that, the right of entry is one aspect, but then after having no teeth in terms of enforcement, in terms of penalties, and that's been a big challenge. And I think all of us have heard different aspects from staff. So I don't expect this to be a difficult task to get, those elements. And then after, in terms of, drafting a letter which is concise, effective, with all those layers of information that the mayor suggested from a communication perspective. And that's exactly why I wanted something which was comprehensive, because, residents I've been in contact with, they're looking towards us to say, what exactly am I going to lobby my MPP about? What exactly am I going to say? what is this issue? Why aren't this issue? So I think that this type of letter, and it leads well into, for example, the budget deliberations that are going to happen, because certainly there's that that impact, and there might be some opportunities for maybe the mayor or someone, be it like Councillor Bowman or someone from delegation, to go to the province or through technology and make that sort of deliberation and ask about, you know, the costs that we have on the city regarding enforcement of secondary units. So I think it leads well, but from a communication exercise, our residents want to know who the hell they should be speaking with. And they come to us for answers, and we sort of do what the best we can, and staff have done a great job. But then after, there's also responsibility with our MPPs. And I think this type of exercise will allow them after, and I would sort of ask communication to sort of provide a lens too, on how we can sort of rally the community around, you know, similar to what we did with healthcare, and get, you know, residents writing their MPPs, asking them to adhere to or try to lobby or pressure for 2 or 3 or 4 aspects of how we deal with basement dwellings. And, you know, I never want to lose sight, and Mayor Brown, I think, made an excellent point, that we should be very excited that people are trying to legalize their basement apartments, and they're trying to follow the law, because we do know that there is a shortage of housing. So I think that we have to find that happy medium. And in terms of the political sort of undertones sometimes, that we have to be just very careful that whatever we're proposing on behalf of council, that it really sort of is more of a technical, because we might think that in one area where this is a big issue, in other area it's only opposite. And we've heard delegations from resident groups who actually feel that, you know, we act almost as a Gestapo, and that we're constantly trying to penalize people and track them down, and we've gone overboard. So I think we need staff to have that second sober thought, look through everything, provide a technical sort of review, and let's have a concise letter which is effective. And this way, in a couple of weeks, we can engage our residents. And I plan on engaging my residents and say, here's a copy of the letter that the mayor has sent. Please send to your local MPP. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowman, for the last time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the great discussion we've had on this. It's wonderful to see that we're all passionate about this issue. If staff say they can try and get this done by next Wednesday or in 2 weeks, I'm fine with that. But I just want to leave you with one thought, and that's, you heard Rick say that we are 10 times the numbers of people wanting basement apartments here than Mississauga. And I would also put that out in terms of complaints. We're probably 8 to 10 times higher than our neighboring municipalities on complaints about illegal basement apartments, bad landlords, unhealthy conditions, unsafe conditions. And, you know, if I'm an MPP and I'm looking at my city, and you've got, because technically, we are not obeying the law if we have illegal basement apartments or illegal rooming houses. If we've got 8 to 10 times the amount of illegal activity, I think that we should be looked at. Somebody should look at us. It happened during COVID when we had the highest numbers. Now we don't anymore. All eyes were on Brampton, and the Premier was willing to do things regionally in that approach. And I think in this approach, it should also be looked at that, you know, we are different than everybody else. So if we can have this back in a week to 2 weeks, I'm fine with that.
All right, thank you. Seeing there are no other comments.
Mr. Chair, sorry,
yeah.
This is Councillor Fortini. My computer's not working. I'm on the phone. I'd like to add something.
Sure. Okay. Councillor Fortini, because you haven't spoken, especially.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, the chair, and thank you for the discussion. So I know we're all passionate about these basement apartments, but if we go back a couple of weeks ago, we were brought forward about lodging homes. So if we can't control these basement apartments, how are we going to control these lodging homes? But if we go back and turn the tables around and go back maybe about 3-4 years ago, our staff said certain areas we cannot have basement apartments because of the sewer backup. A lot of places like in my area in Peel Village, going back down from North Park down, we don't have a storm and a sanitary sewer. So you have a 4-inch line with a 12-inch line. When we start getting all these homes, basement apartments and lodging homes and all, and we get a big storm, what's going to happen is it's going to back up into people's homes. So the Region Appeal gives a rebate to people to put in backwash valves to help. But the Region Appeal gives a rebate to remove your downspouts so it doesn't go in your drains. We come along and say, you're not allowed to use your driveway because too much water going in the drains. Then, I got the Region Appeal telling me they're clogging up the sewers on their road. That way less water goes into our drains and it flows down the road. But meanwhile, we're saying, look, it's okay for lodging homes and basement apartments. So where do we stand here? I'm a little bit confused because driveways say we're not allowed to do because of the water, but it's okay to have lodging homes and have 8 people across the street from me. They're taking a shower or doing laundry. I got a big storm on my thing and the water comes in my house. My infrastructure is still the same as it was in the 70s. Nothing's changed. So we got to look at that too, where we could actually put these lodging homes and the other type of group homes and also basement apartments. And that's what we were told 3 years ago. Now I think different staff is saying things different. So some of the councillors were here before know what we said back then. So just leave it with that. So that's what we have to look at. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Santos for the first one. You have none as well. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, and I echo everything that my colleagues have shared. I think everybody has shares the same passion and concerns that Councillor Bowman has outlined, but I will remind my council colleagues that this leads to a bigger problem that we have in Brampton, which is the development of more affordable housing. And so when development applications come to planning committee and we're talking about more density and more affordable housing, it's important for us to consider the discussion we're having right now, because what ends up happening when we decide to decline all of those positive reports from staff or vote against those positive reports from staff, we end up exasperating the issue of more basement apartments. So that's all I have to say about that, and I support the referral.
Thank you. And seeing that there are no other speakers, I'm just gonna add some comments before I call for a vote. I haven't spoken either. So I just want to thank staff, specifically Rick Kernard, Richard, and enforcement. I've been working with them closely on this issue as well for some time. And I appreciate the spirit behind the original motion, but I do believe it requires a comprehensive look. I was happy to hear the mayor also talk about making it easier and streamlining processes, which I know our building department has advocated for some time, especially when it comes to the building code, and also aligning it with the national building code. So I look forward to everything coming back in a report. And if we're worried about messaging getting diluted, we could split up the letters as well. But I do think that whole the whole report be comprehensive, so we have the best information in front of us before sending any letters. So I will be supporting the motion. I see that recorded vote has been requested by Councillor Vicente. So we will move to a recorded vote on the motion that's put forward by Councillor Medeiros, and I'll let Peter Fay execute that.
Members of committee, so recorded vote's been requested on the referral motion as shown on the screen. All in favor. Councillor Dillon is still absent. Councillor Singh, I'll come back to you. Councillor Fortini?
Yes.
Councillor Williams?
Yes.
Councillor Medeiros?
Yes.
Councillor Bowman?
Yep.
Councillor Paleshi? Councillor Paleshi?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Willens?
Yes.
Councillor Vicente?
Yes.
Councillor Santos?
Yes.
Mayor Brown?
He wrote in the text box, yes.
Chair Singh?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion carries unanimously 10-0.
Okay, thank you. Clerk, just for clarification, I know there's two items added by Councilor Medeiros. Which one was first?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the first one was the letter of credit for the Peel Islamic Center.
Okay, so that will be the first discussion item. Councilor Medeiros, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Just very briefly, the Peel Islamic Cultural Center has been in contact with myself, the mayor, and I know Councillor Palashi, and I know they're an organization that I think all of council in one way or another have not only visited, and I know that they have some mosques throughout the city, or again, my terminology may not be accurate, but they are building a center in Ward 6, just outside of Ward 4, but they have right now, I'm not sure if you would call it a smaller mosque or what you would refer to, but it is in Ward 4. So they approached me with a couple of issues. One of the issues was, in fact, a requirement of a letter of credit. And due to, I believe, what they had suggested is COVID, because in terms of their donations, and I think many faith-based groups are experiencing this, that their donations went considerably down as a result of COVID. And, you know, and when they reached out to me in terms of what can be done or so on, I met with regional staff and I met with the Commissioner of Corporate Services at the region to first find out if the City of Brampton could provide a letter of credit. I then proceeded to speak with our Commissioner of Corporate Services at the City of Brampton and received advice also from our legal department. So essentially what I'm asking in this letter, in this motion, is for staff to come back with, again, a more comprehensive report, because I know there will be a lot of sort of considerations, such as, do we want to set a precedent, because what's going to happen if other faith-based groups come and require this letter of credit? You know, the region has suggested that they would accept a third, or not suggested, they confirmed through their legal that they would receive a third-party letter of credit on behalf of organization. There could be sort of, for example, the City of Brampton could maybe put a lien on, for example, an actual property or building if we wanted to provide a letter of credit. Again, this is just an attempt of a creative way to see how we can help an organization who and I know people don't need to hear me preach of how great they are, but they do, for example, they're providing food to families in need. And, you know, one of the things that's remarkable about the Peel Islamic Center and all the members is that they're providing food to people who are not part of their congregation, people who don't necessarily have their same beliefs, but their whole sort of memorandum of operandi is really to serve the residents of Brampton. So this is just my attempt to trying to help them, and just asking staff to report back and let me all the legalities, all the implications, and then we as a council can review this.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions about this motion? It is just a report coming back. I don't see any, so we will vote on it. Are any members opposed? Seeing and hearing none, the motion carries. Moving on to 9.3.3 is a discussion at the request of Councillor Medeiros on IT.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. I just added this as a result of us working online. You know, one thing that's come to mind is for staff, I'm not sure if I wanted it in the form of a report, and maybe my colleagues can chime in. So a couple considerations, because we're doing everything sort of online. One is to the integrity of these different platforms, because I do know that, for example, some meetings I have to use Teams, some other meetings we're using Skype, other meetings we're using WebEx, and this is all with different staff of the corporation. So I guess one of my concerns is that what is sort of that corporate platform that we can consistently use, that I know and I feel comfortable that is not jeopardized and that has those IT securities. And the second aspect to this is around our emails and around our, and I guess we're not in our offices right now, but regarding our emails, for example, you know, from a political perspective, understanding that, staff, for example, they do their jobs, and I'm not questioning the integrity of anyone in IT or so on. But what insurances or what are the protections that we have to ensure that, my email per se is not being compromised? And, how would I be notified for such? Because, that's something that you've heard in the past in certain controls. And in terms of even IT staff or anyone there, what type of access do they have to my account, to my documents, to my emails, and so on? So, I don't understand all that. And I'm not looking for an answer now, but what I would like maybe, and that could be in the staff report. I'm not sure. I don't see anyone on the board who have any question. Maybe it is a motion on a report back from our staff to tell us about all the security around our emails and, for example, our platforms of communication. So when I do have, for example, a meeting with commissioners, or I'm speaking to other councillors and we're using a platform, is there one corporate platform that is better than others from an IT security perspective, from a communication, and also the security of my email and my documents to ensure that only myself and my assistants have access to it? And how would I be able to ensure that all that information is confidential and that it's maintained within? I don't know if anyone on staff just want to provide what's the best sort of mechanism to report back to council, either in a presentation or a report or whatever. But I just need to be satisfied that all our all this information is being protected.
This is Commissioner Davidson. Through the chair, I'd just like to say that we could provide a presentation to actually go over all the different various tool sets that we have to provide the appropriate security as we move forward. And so that should be possible at a future report.
Okay, and thank you through the chair. Yeah, in terms of timing, this is not urgent. So, but also, so I would say within a month, I guess. In the meantime, if other councillors want to send in questions or other sort of elements that they would like to see in terms of the report back, I just want to be assured that there's not going to be, in terms of protections with confidential information, reports, and emails, and that that there's integrity in the systems that we have in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Chair Singh, your microphone's not active.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So I was just saying I don't see any other questions. So I just wanted to say that I do support this motion because something I've been thinking about in particular, and I'm glad to see that a report will be coming back. Seeing that, COVID's going to change the way we work for a long time, it's good that we're looking at our security. So seeing no members have any questions and there's a motion on the floor, I will request a vote. And if you are opposed, please let us know or write in the message box. Okay, seeing and hearing no objections, the motion carries. Moving on to 9.4, correspondence. There was none. So moving on to 9.5, do any councillors have any questions? Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you very much through you, Chair. In terms of a question that I would like, and again, I assume this will come during their budget. I know there's been a lot of sort of changes in terms of leadership, in terms of middle management. So I'm just hoping that at some stage we will get an updated org chart of who's who. I'm kind of lost on with all the changes. So if we can get, I know usually in our budget binder or usually during the budget time, we get an updated sort of org chart for each department. I'm not sure if anyone would be able to speak to when we can have access to an updated org chart.
I think that would be good for Commissioner Michael or CEO Barrett. An updated org chart.
Thank you.
And that can be, yeah.
Oh, sorry, David here. So thanks, Councillor. I'm just verifying that it's on our website currently. I'll just be able to note that to you in a moment.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Again, be it on our thing or, and I do know that when we go to the budget, usually in each department, when they present their budget, there's usually a sort of updated org charts in terms of positions and so on. So I'm fine with that. Just I just want to know that that'll be updated and reflected.
Thanks, Councillor. So it is current on our internal portal right now. As you noted, we will also be publicizing that through the budget process as well.
Yeah, and thank you, David. One of the challenges that I think with that COVID has brought, I know there's a new management team, and we haven't had the opportunity to sort of meet with any of them, and haven't had the pleasure to meet with any of the new commissioners or some of the sort of directors. So there's names that I'm not familiar with. And again, I know with COVID it's always challenging, but I would encourage if we have opportunities to meet with some of the new hires. Just even a small discussion, I think that would go good. I would personally want that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do any other members have any questions? Seeing and hearing none. To the clerk, do we have any public questions?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I will pass it on to Councillor Vicente for the Public Works and Engineering section.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Next, we have the Public Works and Engineering section of the agenda. 10.3.1 was part of the consent motion, so we move on to 10.5, Councillor question period. Does any member have any questions about today's works agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to public question period. Mr. Clerk, did we have any questions with respect to Public Works and Engineering section of today's agenda?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So I will now pass the chair over to Councillor Santos to chair the Community Services section. Councillor Santos.
Thank you, Councillor Vicente. We are now in the Community Services section. The next item is 11.2.1, a staff report regarding the execution of encroachment agreement with the Coptic Orthodox Patriarch of Alexandria, the Church of Archangel Michael and Saint Thecla. Do any members have any questions regarding this report? If so, please use the chat function. Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Chair Santos. Just a quick question with respect to this item. If we proceed with this encroachment agreement, given that the Orthodox Church who holds, I believe, ownership over the heritage property, would they still be able to have options with respect to the sale or assignments of that property to other parties, given that this encroachment is in place?
Through the chair, Councillor Vicente, the fact that we have an encroachment onto our right-of-way and we have an agreement associated with that would actually be beneficial to the church, as opposed to them trying to do something with that property and then perhaps not have that result. So I actually think it helps them in that regard.
Okay, so can we provide assurance then today that if they choose to sell the property or convey it in any other way, that they will be able to do so even with this encroachment agreement in place?
I believe that's the case. I know we talked about it earlier, and I did check with our team, and I believe that's the case. Would you like me to provide something in writing?
If that is possible and appropriate, that will give them a additional measure of assurance following this decision today from Council.
I'll follow that up then, Councillor Vicente. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Brown.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing as Councillor Vicente. I know this their community center is contingent on their ability to be able to give away the heritage aspect of their property that they receive, that they accepted from the region, and so that they do want to give it to a charity. It's of no use to them, and it's further away in the property. So just maybe, just like Councillor Vicente requested, if we just add it into the motion, the number 3, that city staff write a letter to the Coptic Orthodox Patriarch of Alexandria and the Church of Archangel Michael and St. Tecla, that this encroachment doesn't affect their ability to give or sell their property. I'm not sure. Maybe Peter can speak to wording. I'm bungling the wording, but just the aspect that Councillor Vicente asked for, we just put that on the motion as number 3. That we're not. This should not inhibit their ability to do what they have expressed that is integral for them.
Through you, Madam Chair, then the proposed motion would be, I think Charlotte's writing it now, but yeah, basically that city staff write to the church to confirm that the encroachment agreement with the city does not affect their ability to transfer ownership to another party.
Thank you, Chair. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion on the screen. Or is there any opposition to this motion with the amendment from Mayor Brown? Seeing none, that motion carries. The next item is 11.2.2.
Madam Chair.
Yep. Who is that? Hello?
It's Councillor Paleshi. I'll move the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Paleshi, who is moving the staff report. Is this for 11.2.2, Councillor, or is this the previous item?
It's the item that's in my ward, the church, the Coptic Church.
Got it. Thank you, and the clerk will note that accordingly. The next item is 11.2.2, and that item was part of consent. We're next at 11.2.3, a staff report regarding naming the Bob Callahan Flower City Senior Center. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Bowman has moved it. I see no further questions. Are there any councillors or mayor opposed to the motion? Seeing none, that carries. The next item is other new business, 11.3.1, the Community Safety Advisory Committee minutes, which was part of the consent motion. 11.3.2 is correspondence from the Minister of Resources dated September 23rd. Do any members have any questions regarding the correspondence? If so, please say, Councillor Paleshi, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You went through a couple things. I think, are you just talking about the Brampton Community Safety Advisory Committee minutes?
I did, yep, that item was put into consent.
Okay. I didn't realize it was put into consent. There was a recommendation that coming out of there with respect to the quorum. If that's put into consent, are we moving forward with their request?
I don't believe
that
anyone.
Through you, Madam Chair, and to the clerk.
Sure, I don't think anybody removed the item out of consent. Mr. Clerk, can you clarify?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, there is a recommendation from the committee that through the consent motion is approved to reduce the quorum for the Community Safety Advisory Committee from 12, I believe it is, to 10.
And so, Mr. Chair, with that item being in consent and council support of the minutes here today, ratification next week, that moves the quorum down to 10?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies, Madam Chair. Or thank you, Mr. Clerk. My apologies, Madam Chair.
That's okay, Councillor Paleshi. I'm trying to move fast through this agenda. 11.3.2, there are no questions at the moment regarding the correspondence. Yep, okay, I have a motion. Do we have to move the correspondence for receipt? From Councillor Vicente? Yep, Councillor Vicente, thank you. Any opposed? That carries. The next item is 11.5, Councillor question period. Oh, no, 11. No, that's correct. 11.5, Councillor question period. Do any councillors have any questions regarding this section? Seeing none. 11.6, public question period. Mr. Clerk, do we have any questions regarding this section?
There are no questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Item number 12, referred matters list, which is published quarterly on a meeting agenda, and the link is part of the agenda as well. Do any members have any questions regarding the referred matters list? Seeing none, I have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini to receive the referred matters list. Any opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Public question period. Do we have any questions, Mr. Clerk, for public question period regarding this entire committee meeting?
We do not, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Item number 14 is closed session. I have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente to move into closed session to deal with the following item. That committee proceed into closed session to discuss matters pertaining to the following 14.1 open meeting exception under section 239 2K of Municipal Act 2001. A position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of municipality or local board. To many members watching in today's meeting, all meetings of committee must start and end in public session. After closed session is completed, committee will reconvene in public to complete its business on today's agenda, including reporting out on any actions arising from its closed session and passing a confirming bylaw to confirm the proceedings and decisions from this meeting and adjourning the meeting. I have a motion moved by, who did I say Councillor Vicente? No, we'll choose somebody else. Councillor Medeiros to move into closed. Any opposed? That carries. Mr. Clerk, how much time do you need and any further instructions to go into closed?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will need 10 minutes, please, members of committee. And there is a separate email that was sent to members last night with a Microsoft Teams meeting for the closed session to connect to. So you can leave this session after recess for WebEx and join the Microsoft Teams session.
Okay, so everyone to leave WebEx and join the Microsoft Teams session for closed session in 10 minutes. We will see you in closed at 11:52. Thank you.
time.
Thank you very much. In the continuing interest of transparency and open government, I will report in public session any outcomes from today's closed session business. As a result of our closed session today, I wish to report the following. 14.1 open meeting exception under section 239 2K of Municipal Act 2001, a position plan procedure criteria or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. This item was considered in closed and direction was given to staff to include direction to consider the following motion in open session. And the clerk does have it up on the screen for everybody. Okay. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Oh, I need it moved by someone. Moved by Councillor Maderos. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. Seeing none, that motion carries. Our last item of business is 15, adjournment. We did great today, folks. Committee is next scheduled to meet Wednesday, October 21st, 2020 at 9:30. I have a motion moved by Councillor Willens to adjourn today's meeting, that the Committee of Council do now adjourn to meet again on Wednesday, October 21st, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. or at the call of the chair. Is there anyone opposed to this motion at 12:04 p.m. today? No opposition. Thank you. There are no objections. The motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Happy Thanksgiving long weekend, everyone, and please stay safe, stay healthy, practice physical distancing, wear a mask, and wash your hands. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your afternoon.